Hey guys, what's going on? So I'm over here at Steve's place. We're getting ready to service the transmission in my 2012 Ford Expedition. We're gonna put a filter in it and do a refill. So we'll show you what's involved with this. This should be the same as a 2007 to a 2014 Expedition. My truck has a 5.4 in it, so we get going on this. Before we get started, remember to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and subscribe to all of our notifications. That way you'll get a heads up when we upload a new video.
So we got Tony's training up here, his Expedition, the 2012, the 5.4. It's 4-wheel drive. We're gonna service his transmission, change the filter. The gasket is reusable, and it's got 8mm bolts all around the pan. The pan on this end, it kind of hangs underneath his exhaust here. So we got a swivel 5/16 or 8mm to get these out. We're gonna take all the bolts out of the front of it over here. We're gonna let it hang and drip into this pan. And on the side of the transmission over here on this side, this is where the drain plug is, and the, pardon me, not the drain plug, this is where his dipstick check is. So we use a 19mm wrench to take this plug out, and then it's got a little tiny plastic dipstick in there to tell you what the level is. These are kind of difficult to check. You're probably not going to check this on the ground, and if you put it up in the air, the vehicle has to be pretty level. And it should be at operating temperature, about 140 degrees, to check this fluid here. So we are going to drain the fluid from the pan by lowering the pan down and draining the fluid into the pan without trying to make a mess. And the gasket's reusable. Tony's got a new Ford transmission filter that he bought, and we'll show you the number on that. And then this is how you fill the transmission back up through this plug area in here when we take this out. And what I like to do with these is, if you have two guys and you're doing it, you can fill the pan up with fluid, and then you can lower it up with two guys and catch some bolts, and that's less fluid that you're gonna have to either use a fluid refill bottle, or you can use a suction gun. And if we use a suction gun and we do it the way that we're going to do it, we're probably only going to need to put a couple quarts in to get the level back to where we need it. So we got our zip gun going here, and we're going to start pulling down these bolts right now. So you want to crack these loose with the hand ratchet first. And we did that to crack them loose because you don't want to break any. You want to make sure they come out easily. And we're going to start on the front here and start working our way down the sides and try and get fluid to drain out of this thing evenly without making a mess if possible. There's no drain plug on the pan right here. You know, there's a perfect spot. I guess you could put one, but there is not one on this pan. So we're going to take the fluid out of it and kind of be careful with it. Still a little warm because Tony just got here. That's all right. Starting to see a little fluid seeping out now. Nice and dirty.
Yeah, it's real dirty.
So we'll take a minute, let it drip down and slow down a little bit.
It's like Niagara Falls under here.
Yeah.
Little at a time.
chocolate mess yet, so that's good.
I get $10 riding on the pan.
I'm gonna put one back in over here. Loosely, so that I can take down this other one back here. Alright, so we have one on each corner here that's holding this pan up. And then now we've got most of this draining out, we can put a bolt back up in here, and then we'll let the back of it drain down a little bit.
What a mess.
Yeah, I'm trying not to make a mess. And if you're doing this in your garage and you know, just take your time with it, you know, so you're not making a big friggin' mess.
Why they don't put a drain plug in these tranny pans is beyond me. It's insane.
That would be nice.
Yeah, no kidding.
Alright. Now we'll take these out. Well, I got one bolt in there. Take this one out.
Oh man.
Okay. Alright, we're gonna let that drain for a minute. Alright, I'm gonna try and do this myself, see if I don't make a mess. So I'm gonna take this one bolt off here. I'm gonna hold the pan up. Take this one off here. Now we've taken our time so that we don't make a fucking mess. And let's see if we can salvage this. So we're gonna lower it down a little bit. I'm trying to keep it as level as I possibly can. The filter just fell out. And there we go, we got it down. Now the filter, they give you it on the new filter, they give you an orange ring on it right here. Now when we put this back up into the valve body hole here, into the body of the transmission, we want to clean this hole so it's dry. We want this thing to stick in there and really hold good. So we're going to drain the fluid out of the filter, and we're taking the pan out. Now Tony's concerned about the fluid color. I've seen worse. Well, the good thing here is you look at the transmission, there's no metal in here, it's very clean. You want to inspect it for heavy clutch material. We don't have that, which is really good. So we'll bring this over to the bench. We're going to clean all of the inside of the pan here. We're going to clean our gasket up really good, and we're going to put a thin coat of grease on it after we wipe it all down so we get it going. We're also going to clean the hole in the body here, so when the filter stem goes back up here, this new stem is going to be, the seal is going to be dry. We want that dry. We don't want this to fall out, because this thing, the only thing that holds this filter back in place is the fact that it sits on this pan in this seal right here. So let's go over and get the pan all cleaned up. Alright, get some rags. Here's your main magnet that's drawing your metal and everything out of the pan. And there's not a lot on it, it's pretty clean. So we're gonna wanna clean that up really good. And I don't feel like you need a whole bunch of carburetor cleaner to clean this all down. If you wipe this out with some clean rags, you're gonna be good. So I wouldn't waste a ton of carburetor cleaner on it. Just wipe your magnet down here. It's a standard size magnet that's in most transmissions at this point. We got our gasket here. We want to gently wipe it down. It's reusable. Okay, so we inspected our gasket. The seal is pretty much on the edge here. We don't see any splits or tears in it, so I'm pretty comfortable with reusing this. It's all wiped down clean. So we'll go with that. It's only going to go on one way. There's no metal in here. There's no, heavy clutch material, which is good. Wipe the seat all down where the gasket's gonna sit. The very last thing I'm gonna do is suck this out of the pouch here with the rag. This is the lowest sump part of the transmission where the filter actually is gonna sit right in this pocket. So, we got one more clean rag. And this is really all I'm going to need to clean this thing out. If you have heavy clutch material in here or metal, you've really got an issue. You got to be careful with that. I wouldn't be confident if we've seen that. So, although Tony doesn't like the color of the fluid, I'm comfortable with what we're seeing here inside the pan. So, we're going to get this thing all cleaned up, put back on. All right, so we got our magnet wiped down. The final clean rag. Looks good. Wasn't a lot on it. Stick it back in place. We're going to get a little thin coat of grease and we're going to wipe it on the pan here. Then we're going to dry the inside of that case where the hole is, where the filter goes up in place, and then we'll install the filter. And what I like to do here is, because you have to fill this with either a suction gun or a fluid filler, and we have both. But I like to fill the transmission pan up with as much fluid as I can and gently go over and hold it up in place. That's just saving me time from using the suction gun to fill it. And then at that point I can probably fill what's ever left with, maybe 4 suction guns, probably 2 quarts of fluid, and I should be where I need to be. So we just applied a thin coat of grease on the pan, then we sat the gasket down and we put a thin coat on the other side of it. And kind of what I like about doing this is kind of an old school trick, is once you put this pan back up and you tighten all your screws evenly, you should see just a little bit of grease coming out the edge. So now you know it's tightened up evenly, and you can use this on cork gaskets, and I always put a little bit, on this. This is just the way I've always done it. So let's go over and clean that hole in the case and get our filter mounted in there. I'm going to sit this over on the blocks so that it's level, and we're going to fill this with fluid and try and get as much fluid put in this thing that we can, so that we can get we won't have to put as much fluid in it with the fill with the gun, with the suction gun. So kind of what our thought process is. So I'm getting the pan kind of level, and then we're just gonna pour the fluid in here and kind of get it as close as we can, and then very gingerly walk the thing over. The more fluid I get in this thing now, the less fluid I have to pump into the hole. So we're gonna go over the dipstick now with the 19mm wrench. Let's take that out first. So we got a 19mm wrench to take this out. If you haven't taken it out, it can be tight. So now if you look here, you can see the dipstick right here. This is the dipstick. And all this is a steel cap up here, and the dipstick kind of fits in with it. So it's coming out with it right now, but it separates like this. So when we're done and we're running this, we're just gonna take this and we're gonna stick it inside the hole here, and it's tight in here. And what sucks about this is, so this is how we're gonna check it. So it's sitting in the hole right like that, and then we're gonna pull this out, and then we're gonna check to make sure the fluid level is where it needs to be on the stick here, right? But the problem here is your exhaust is right next to you. And when you run in the car, it's obviously hot. So you're trying to do this on the ground, forget about it. It's gotta be up in the air. And if you put it up on jack stands, make sure it's even so that your fluid level is even. But you know, this is a very tight situation. So we're leaving this right here. We're gonna wipe down, first, before I get my rag tube wet with training fluid, the hole up in here is where the filter runs. And we wanna get this nice and dry, really dry right in here. And this is where our filter is gonna sit, right up in there. So we're getting that dry so the filter locks in place, and we're gonna wipe down our transmission now. Wipe this down. All right, so you got your solenoid pack over here in the back. And we're not rebuilding transmissions here, so we're just servicing this. So we're gonna get everything, we're gonna put the filter install right now, and we're gonna fill up the pan with fluid. So we're matching up our filter, and it's pretty much the same. The design has changed just a little bit on the suction end here, but it's still the same thing. And then we got our seal here. We're gonna line this up with the hole, and you can give it a little notch to put it up in place. And see how it just hangs there? So you want it dry to try and do it. Now we're gonna try and fill that fluid up in that pan and get this thing up in place before we make a big mess here. So let's try that. Okay, so we're filling up the pan here. And Tony's gonna help me get this thing up in place. So, you know, I probably got almost 4 quarts in this thing right now. And this is just less fluid that I'm gonna have to go pump into this thing. So we're gonna push this thing up in place, and then we're gonna catch, you know, 2 or 4 bolts and snug it up. And then we're gonna catch all the rest of the bolts before we do our final tightening. All right, so we're feeding the thing up slowly. Trying not to make a chocolate mess. Trying not to hit the filter. Line up on your bolts. Yeah? Yeah, any one that you can line up and get started.
Helps if you have a couple people, another guy helping you out. You know.
Make sure you get these started without stripping them. This one's kind of giving me a hard time.
Look at this side.
You got all the bolts swinging, just probably a couple. Alright, so we're gonna work our way around the pan and get these put in.
And because this is a reusable gasket, you can't really over torque them. Just get them snug, so you won't be able to split it. Just snug them up and you will be good. All right, so we got the pan up in place. Our filter didn't fall out. We're tightening the rest of the bolts. We snugged the back ones. We used a quarter drive 8mm swivel socket to get in the back here. It's tough to get in here. You can get in here with a wobbly extension, but the quarter drive 8mm really worked out well. I'm just gonna run these up, and I'm not tightening them, just running them up so they seat. And we want to hand tighten this pan. Tony and I started them all by hand, to make sure that they weren't stripped. You don't want to strip one of these and then have to try and tap it. So you're taking a little time doing it, and it's going to pay off. And you can tighten these up with the quarter drive setup that I have. Okay, we got a quarter drive 8mm setup with our extension and ratchet. And we're gonna go around twice to make sure that these things are all snugged up, to make sure you didn't forget any. And I'm just giving them a good snug. Remember, these have eyelids in the gasket, and you can obviously crush them, but you're gonna know when the resistance is when you tighten it up so you don't go too tight. And then after we get this thing snugged up here, we're gonna go around one more time and check them. And then after we run it, we'll make sure that there's no leaks. I remember I was talking about my grease on my pan, how I put the grease on the gasket. And as I'm tightening it up, you see a little bit of grease oozing out here. And at the end, we're gonna wipe this all down, but that's telling me that my gasket is even. That I don't have a piece of debris up there that's stopping me. And so that's one time around. We're gonna double check them all right now. Make sure that they're tight. Now, no matter what you're putting on for a gasket, I kind of tend to like to use the grease trick, whether it's a thermostat gasket or anything. And when you see the grease coming out all around the edges, you know it's been tightened evenly and you have a good mating surface and you won't have any leaks. Grease is petroleum, it's just gonna break down. It's not gonna damage the transmission or anything, so we only put a thin coat on. And going around my second time here. I don't think you should tighten these things up with your impact gun. Just, snug them up by hand. It's only taking me another minute or so to do this by hand. That's my last one. Okay, I went around twice, so I know I didn't miss any. I've got my grease oozing out on here on the edge, just a thin coat. I'm gonna take my rag, I'm just gonna wipe it down. Make sure you get the pan dry. You don't want the customer leaving with the thing smoking away. It will eventually, you know, burn off shortly, but you know, just a little extra time you're putting in right here to clean this thing up is worth it. Now, we have our plug out over here to fill, and you know, I have a filling tool that you pump up and then you can, you know, pressurize it. I'll be honest with you, I use the suction gun. I kind of tend to like it. So we're gonna use the rest of that 5-quart capacity to fill this pan, and then we're gonna dump the fluid that we took out of this back into the container. So we're gonna know really how much fluid that we took out of this thing, and we'll know if it was low on fluid or if it was overfilled by when we use our dipstick here. Now we've wiped down the dipstick, and we can show you, here's your readings with it. And we want to be close to the check mark here when we're hot, right up in this area here where the mark is. So once you're about 140 degrees, if we're in our middle here, we are good. That gives us some room for expansion, and we're going to know how much fluid we took out in a minute, because we're going to drain it back into that bucket. All right, we're going to suck the fluid into the suction gun here. Do this without making a mess. Now I gotta come up on this angle here, and here's the fitting. And now I'm just gonna pump it in. I don't have to go too fast. Usually 2 suction guns will drain 1 quart of fluid. After we empty this 5-quart capacity, we're going to dump this tranny fluid, the used stuff, into it, and we're going to know how much that we took out. All right, so we're gonna dump this into our bucket and see how much fluid that we have, that we took out.
Steady. I could probably hold the jug, but I'm the cameraman. I can get it for you, buddy.
I already see that coming.
that thing's gonna walk on you.
So we just slowed the truck down, so right now I'm gonna get in it, start it up, go through the gears, and we're gonna raise it back up and check the transmission fluid level. So what I'm doing right now is I'm running the truck on the lift. Steve's underneath the truck. I just went through some of the gears. He checked the dipstick that we showed you, that little white dipstick. We were about a quart low, so I shut the truck off. Steve put about another quart in it, and I started the truck back up, and he's rechecking the fluid level.
So we got it running on the lift. We got our just about 9 quarts in it, and we're looking for our sweet spot, you know, right in between these 2 marks right here is really what we want. The transmission's about 140 degrees right now. It's running. Tony shifted it through all the gears. Pop our dipstick in right now while it's running. Check it. And we're right in our sweet spot right here. That's where we want to be. So as it gets hotter, it's going to rise a little bit. But right now we are in our sweet spot, right where we want, right on that line. So we're gonna put this plug back in. Now, like I said, this converter is friggin' hot right now, so we're gonna put that in, and we're gonna tighten our nut back up here. Be very careful, this thing is hot. That's why I said if you're on the ground trying to do this, it's pretty much virtually impossible. Once you get it up on 4 jack stands and nice and level and, you know, safe. We got our 19mm wrench here, we're gonna tighten this up. Okay, that's snug. Just wipe it down our pan, make sure everything's clean and dry in here. We don't have any leaks. Yeah, it looks good. Alrighty. So we filled the rest of our jug, and we're compensating for a little bit of fluid that we lost when we put the pan up with the thing full. And we're about 8 quarts to drain the transmission pan, change the filter, and refill it. We figure about 8 quarts it took us to do that. We bought 2 10-gallon jugs, and we ran it to 140 degrees to operating temperature, and we put our stick in while it's running, and it's right in the sweet spot, so it's not overfilled, it's not underfilled, and we're about 8 quarts doing the service on the transmission. So the fluid that we used was a full synthetic fluid, and we didn't use the Ford fluid, we used this as recommended, which would be just as good, and it's about $60 for 10 quarts, and you know, we also use this on the transfer case. So we use between 10 and 11 quarts, about 11 quarts between the transfer case and doing the transmission. And the synthetic fluid is going to allow your clutches to run 20 to 40 degrees cooler. It's worth the investment in the better transmission fluid, especially if you're going to do any towing with it at all. And Tony does do some towing with all his toys. So we wanted the better fluid in it, and we went with the Valvoline. So.